What's up, Facebook friends and family? Happy Sunday. If you don't know who I am, I'm Melissa Eloise Osborne, coming from Marathon, New York. And I'm going to do lesson 7. I know probably everybody is off doing their own thing, which is fine. I want to thank you, replay viewers. Welcome to my live. And I hope you get some value out of this reading, which is lesson 7, which is self-control, which I did a post on this because we all need to work on our self-control. It's how we become better leaders and individuals. That's what I'm trying to teach my kids too, my youngest. So say hi, please don't be shy. And what else do? I help people build their business using their phone, teaching them the little skills of how to, not only that, help your clients to be more comfortable in the inbox and showing leading with heart, not just selling people anything, because our purpose is to better serve and help our community grow. So, and I'm going to do my affirmations. Hey, honey, thank you, Martin Milligan, for popping in. Appreciate it, hon. So first things first is my affirmations. I believe in myself. I believe in those who work with me. I believe in my employer. I believe in my friends. I believe in my family. I believe that God will lend me everything I need with which to succeed if I do my best to earn it through faithful and honest service. I believe in prayer, and I'll never close my eyes in sleep without praying for divine guidance to the end, that I will be patient with other people and tolerant with those who do not believe as I do. I believe success is a result of intellect, effort, and does not depend upon luck or sharp practices or double-crossing friends or fellow men or my employer. I believe I will get out of life exactly what I put into it. Therefore, I will be careful to conduct myself toward others as I would want them to act toward me. I will not slander those whom I do not like. I will not slight my work no matter what I may see others doing. I will render the best service of which I am capable because I have pledged myself to succeed in life. And I know that success is always a result of conscience and efficient effort. Finally, I will forgive those who offend me because I realize I will sometimes offend others and I will need their forgiveness, which is true. And if I don't get your comments or read your comments, is because I will check the comments after I'm done with my reading to get back to you if you have any questions, or do take notes too, because you might come up with some really good ideas that will help you grow. And I'm sorry about the lighting. I do my best. Okay, lesson 7, self-control. You can do it if you believe you can. In the preceding lesson, you learned of the value of enthusiasm. You also learned how to generate enthusiasm and how to transmit its influence to others through the principle of suggestion. You come now to the study of self-control, through which you may direct your enthusiasm to constructive ends. Without self-control, enthusiasm resembles the unharnessed lightning of an electric storm. It may strike anywhere. It may destroy life and property. Enthusiasm is a vital quality that arouses you to take action, while self-control is the balance wheel that directs your action so that it will build up and not tear down. To be a person who is well balanced, you must be a person in whom enthusiasm and self-control are equalized. A survey that I have just completed of the 160,000 adult inmates of the penitentiaries of the United States disclosed the startling fact that the 92% of these unfortunate men and women are in prison because they lacked the necessary self-control to direct their energies constructively. Read the foregoing paragraph again. To be a person who is well balanced, you must be a person in whom enthusiasm and self-control are equalized. A survey that I have just completed Of the 160,000 adult inmates of the penitentiaries of the United States, disclosure the startling fact that 92% of these unfortunate men and women are in prison because they lack the necessary self-control to direct their energy constructively. I know I read that twice. Read this foregoing paragraph again. It is authentic. It is startling. It is a fact that the majority of men's griefs come about through lack of self-control. The Holy Scripture are full of admonish, admonish in support of self-control. They even urge us to love our enemies and to forgive those who injure us. The law of non-resistance runs like a golden cord throughout the Bible. Study the records of those men whom the world calls great and observe that every one of them possesses this quality of self-control. For example, to study characteristics of our own immortal Lincoln. In the midst of his most trying hours, he exercised patience, poise, and self-control. These were the qualities that made him the great man that he was. He found disloyalty in some of the members. Wait, I just like these were the qualities that made him the great man that he was. He found disloyalty in some of the members of his cabinet, but because of his disloyalty was toward him personally and became those in whom he found it, had qualities that made them valuable to his country. Lincoln exercised self-control and discarded the objectionable qualities. How many men do you know who have self-control to equal this? However, self-control becomes an important factor in this reading course of the law of success. Not so much because lack of its works hardships on those who become its victims, as for the reason that those who do not exercise it suffer the loss of a great power that they need in their struggle for achievement of their definite purpose. If you neglect to exercise self-control, you are not only likely to injure others, but you are sure to injure yourself. During the early part of my public career, I discovered what havoc lack of self-control was playing in my life. And this discovery came about through a very commonplace incident. I believe it not out of place here to digress by making the statement that most of the great truths of life are wrapped up in the ordinary, commonplace events of everyday life. This discovery taught me one of the most important lessons I have ever learned. It came about in this way. One day in the building in which I had my office, the janitor and I had a misunderstanding. This disagreement led to a most violent form of mutual dislike between us. As a means of showing his contempt for me, this janitor would switch off the electricity lights of the building when he knew that I was there alone at work in my study. This happened on several occasions until I finally decided to strike back. My opportunity came one Sunday morning when I came to my study to prepare an address that I had to deliver for the following night. I had hardly seated myself at my desk when off went the lights. I jumped to my feet and ran toward the basement of the building where I knew I would find the janitor. When I arrived, I found him busily engaged, shoveling coal into the furnace and whistling as though nothing usually had happened. Without ceremony, I pitched into him, and for 5 minutes I hurled objectives at him that were hotter than the fire that he was feeding. Finally, I ran out of words and had to slow down. Then he straightened himself up, looked back over his shoulder, and in a calm, smooth tone of voice that was full of poise and self-control, and with a smile on his face that reached from ear to ear, he said, "Why, you all's just a little bit excited this morning, ain't you?" That remark cut as though it had been a silhouette. Imagine my feelings as I stood there before an illiterate man who could neither read nor write, but who, despite his handicap, had defeated me in a duel that had been fought on grounds and with a weapon of my own choice. My conscience pointed an accusing finger at me. I knew that not only I had been defeated, but What was worse, I knew that I was the aggressor and that I was in the wrong, which only served to intensify my humiliation. Not only did my conscience point an accusing finger at me, but in place some very embarrassing thoughts in my mind. It mocked me, and it tantalized me. There I stood, a boasted student of advanced psychology, an exponent of the golden rule philosophy, having at least a fair acquaintance with the works of Shakespeare, Socrates, Plato, and Emerson, and the Holy Bible, while facing me stood a man who knew nothing of literature or of philosophy, but who had, despite this lack of knowledge, whipped me in a battle of words. I turned and went back to my office as rapidly as I could go. There was nothing else for me to do. As I began to think the matter over, I saw my mistake. But true to nature, I was reluctant to do that which I knew must be done, to right the wrong. I knew that I would have to apologize to that man before I could place myself at peace in my own heart, much less with him. Finally, I made up my mind to go back down to the basement and suffer this humility that I knew I had to undergo. The decision was not easily reached, nor did it reach it quickly. I started down, but I walked more slowly than I had when I went down the first trip. I was trying to think how I would make the second approach so as to suffer the least humiliation possible. When I got to the basement, I called to the janitor to come over to the door. In a calm, kindly tone of voice, he asked, "What do you wish this time?" I informed him that I had come back to apologize for the wrong I had done, if he would permit me to do so. Again that smile spread all over his face as he said, "For the love of the Lord, you don't have to apologize. Nobody heard you except these four walls and you and me. I ain't going to tell it. And I knew you ain't going to tell it, so just forget it." And that remark hurt more than his first one, for he had not only expressed a willingness to forgive me, but he actually indicated his willingness to help me cover the incident up, so it would not become known and do me an injury. But I walked over to him and took him by the hand. I shook with more than my hand, I shook with my heart. And as I walked back to my office, I felt good for having summoned the courage with which to right the wrong I had done. This is not the end of the story, it is only the beginning. Following this incident, I made a resolution that I would never again place myself in a position in which another man, whether he be an illiterate janitor or a man of letters, could humiliate me because I had lost my self control. Following that resolution, a remarkable change began to take place in me. My pen began to take on greater power. My spoken words began to carry greater weight. I began to make more friends and fewer enemies among men of my acquaintances. The incident marked one of the most important turning points of my life. It taught me that no man can control others unless he first controls himself. It gave me a clear concept of the philosophy back of these words. Whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. It also gave me a clear conception of the law of non-resistance and helped me interpret many passages of the Holy Scripture bearing on the subject of this law as I had never before interpreted them. This incident placed in my hand the pass key to a storehouse of knowledge that is illuminating and helpful in all that I do. And later in life, when enemies sought to destroy me, it gave me a powerful weapon of defense that has never failed me. Lack of self-control is the average salesman's most damaging weakness. The prospector buyer says something that the salesman does not wish to hear, and if he has not this quality of self-control, he will strike back with a counter remark that is fatal to his sale. In one of the large department stores of Chicago, I witnessed an incident that illustrated the importance of self-control. A long line of women were in front of the complaint desk. Teller, telling their troubles and the store's faults to the young woman in charge. Some of the women were angry and unreasonable, and some of them made very ugly remarks. The young woman at the desk received the disgruntled woman without the slightest sign of resentment at their remarks. With a smile on her face, she directed these women to the proper departments with such charming grace and poise that I marvel at her self-control. Standing just back of her was another young woman who was making notation on slips of paper and passing them in front of her as the woman in the line unburdened their troubles. These slips of papers contained the gist of what the woman in the line were saying, minus the vitriolic coloring, which I gotta look up that word, and the anger. The smiling young woman at the desk who was hearing the complaints was stone deaf. Her assistant supplied her with all the necessary facts through those slips of paper. I was so impressed with the plan that I sought the manager of the store and interviewed him. He informed me that he had selected a deaf woman for one of the most trying and important positions in the store for the reason that he had not been able to find any other person with sufficient self control to fill the place. As I stood and watched that line of angry women, I observed what a modifying effect the smile of the young woman at the desk had upon them. They came before her growling like wolves and went away as meek and quiet as sheep. In fact, some of them had sheepish looks on their faces as they left because the young woman's self control had made them ashamed of themselves. Ever since I witnessed that scheme, I thought of the poise and self control of that young woman at the desk every time. I felt myself becoming irritated at remarks that I did not like, and often I had the thought that everybody should have a set of mental earmuffs they could slip over their ears at times. Personally, I've developed the habit of closing my ears against much of the idle chatter, such as I used to make in my business, to resent. Life is too short, and there is too much constructive work to be done to justify us in striking back at every one who says that which we do not wish to hear. In the practice of law, I have observed a very clever trick that trial lawyers use when they wish to get a statement of facts from a belligerent witness who answers question with a proverbial "I do not remember" or "I do not know." When everything else fails, they manage to make such a witness angry, and in this statement of mind they cause him to lose his self-control and make statements that he would not have made had he kept a cool head. Most of us go through life with our weather eye cast skyward in quest of trouble. We usually find that for which we are looking. In my travels, I have been a student of men whom I have heard in Pullman car conversation, and I have observed that practically 9 out of every 10 have so little self control that they will invite themselves into the discussion of almost any subject that may be brought up. But few men are contented to sit in the smoking compartment and listen to a conversation without joining in and airing their views. Once I was traveling from Albany to New York City. On the way down, the Smoking Car Club started a conversation about the late Richard Cocker. Heck of a name. I feel sorry for that guy. Who was the then chef of Tammany, Tammany Hall. The discussion became loud and bitter. Everybody became angry except one old gentleman who was agitated. The argument and taking a lively interest in it, he remained calm and seemed to enjoy all the mean things that others said about the tiger of Tammany Hall. Of course, I suppose that he was an enemy of the Tammy chef, but he wasn't. He was Richard Crocker himself. This was one of his clever tricks, through which he found out what people thought of him, and what his enemies' plans were. This is smart. Whatever else Richard Crocker might have been, he was a man of self control. Perhaps that is one reason why he remained undisputed boss of Tammany Hall as long as he did. Men who control themselves usually boss the job, no matter what it may be. Character is built through one's thoughts and deeds and in no other way. Please read again. Oh, I don't want to read that again. Please read again the last sentence of the preceding paragraph, for it carries a subtitle suggestion that might be of profit to you. This is a commonplace incident, but it is in just such incidents that the great truths of life are hidden. Hidden because the settings are ordinary and commonplace. Not long ago, I accompanied my wife on a bargain hunting bee. Our attention was attracted by a crowd of women who were elbowing each other out of the way in front of a petticoat counter at which bargains were being offered. One lady who looked to be out about 40 years old or 40 years of age crawled on her hands and knees through the crowd and bobbed up in front of the customer who had engaged the attention of the saleswoman. Ahead of her, in a loud, high pitched tone of voice, she demanded attention. The saleswoman was a diplomat who understood human nature. She also possessed self control, for she smiled sweetly at the intruder and said, "Yes, miss, I will be with you in a moment." The intruder calmed herself. I do not know whether it was the "yes, miss" or the sweet tone in which it was said that modified her attitude, but it was one or the other. Perhaps it was both. I do know, however, the saleswoman was rewarded for her self control by the sale of 3 petticoats, and the happy Miss went away feeling much younger by the remark. Roast turkey is a very popular dish, but overrating of its cost, a friend of mine who is in the printing business of 50,000 orders. It happened the day after Thanksgiving. When I called at his office for the purpose of introducing him to a prominent Russian who had come to the United States to publish a book. The Russian spoke broken English, and it was therefore hard for him to make himself easily understood. During the interview, he asked my printer friend a question that was mistaken as a reflection upon his ability as a printer. In an underguarded moment, he countered with this remark: "The trouble with you Bolsheviks is that you look with suspicion on the remainder of the world just because of your own short-sightedness." My Bolshevik friend nudged me on the elbow and whispered, "The gentleman seems to be sick." We shall call again when he is feeling better. But he never called again. He placed his order with another printer, and I learned afterward that the profit on that order was more than $10,000. Seems a high price to pay for a plate of turkey, but that is the price that it cost my printer friend, for he offered me an apology for his conduct on the ground that his turkey dinner had given him indigestion, and therefore he had lost his self-control. One of the largest chain store concerns in the world has adopted a very unique, though, though effect method of employing salespeople who have developed the essential quality of self-control that all successful salespeople must possess. This concern has in its employ a very clever woman who visits department stores and other places where salespeople are employed and selects certain ones who she believes possess tact and self-control. But to be sure of her judgment, she approaches these salespeople and has them show her their wares. She asks all sorts of questions that are designed to try their patience. If they stand the test, they are offered better positions. If they fail in the test, they are merely allowed a good opportunity to pass by without knowing it. No doubt all people who refuse or neglect to exercise self-control are literally turning opportunity after opportunity away without knowing it. One day I was standing at the glove counter of a large retail store, talking to a young man who was employed there. He was telling me that he had been with the store for 4 years, but on an account of the store's sightedness of the store, his services had not been appreciated, and he was looking for another position. In the midst of this conversation, a customer walked up to him and asked to see some hats. He paid no attention to the customer's inquiry until he had finished telling me his troubles. Despite the fact that the customer was obviously becoming impatient, finally he returned to the customer and said, "This isn't the hat department." When the customer inquired as to where he might find that department, the young man replied, "Ask the walker over there. He will redirect you." So out of that was not very polite. For 4 years, this young man had been standing on top of a fine opportunity, but he did not know it. He could have made a friend of every person whom he served in that store, and these friends could have made him one of the most valuable men in the store. But because they have come back to trade with him, snappy answers to inquire customers do not bring them back. One rainy afternoon, an old lady walked into a Pittsburgh department store and wandered around in an aimless sort of way, very much in the manner that people who have no intentions of buying often do. Most of the salespeople gave her the once over and buried themselves by straightening the stock on their shelves so as to avoid being troubled by her. One of the young men saw her and made it his business to politely inquire if might serve her. She informed him that she was only waiting for it to stop raining, that she did not wish to make any purchases. The young man assured her that she was welcome, and by engaging her in a conversation, made her feel that he had meant what he said. When she was ready to go, he accompanied her to the street and raised her umbrella for her. She asked for his card and went on her way. The incident had been forgotten by the young man when one day he was called into the office by the head of the firm and shown a letter from a lady who wanted a salesman to go to Scotland and take an order for the furnishings for a mansion. Wow. That lady was Andrew Carnegie's mother. Wow. She was also the same woman whom the young man had so courteously escorted to the street many months previously. In the letter, Miss Carnegie specified that this young man was the one whom she desired to be sent to take her order. That order amounted to an enormous sum, and the incident brought the young man an opportunity for advancement that he might never have accepted for his courtesy to an old lady who did not look like a ready sale. Just as the great fundamental laws of life are wrapped up in the commonest sort of everyday experiences, and most of us never notice, so are the real opportunities often hidden in the seemingly unimportant transactions of life. Ask the next 10 people whom you meet why they have not accomplished more in their respective lines of endeavor, and at least 9 of them will tell you that opportunity doesn't seem to come around their way. Go a step further and analyze each of these 9 accurately by observing their actions for one single day. And the chances are that you will find that every one of them is turning away the finest sort of opportunities every hour of the day. One day I went to visit a friend who was associated with a commercial school in the capacity of solicitor. When I asked him how he was getting along, he replied, "Rotten. I see a large number of people, but I am not making enough sales to give me a good living. In fact, my account with this school is overdrawn, and I'm thinking about changing positions as there is no opportunity here. I'm just putting my own enthusiasm to this one." It happened that I was on my vacation and had 10 days. Time that I could use as I wished. So I challenged his remark that he had no opportunity by telling him that I could turn his position into a $250 in a week's time and show him how to make it worth that every week thereafter. He looked at me in amazement and asked me not to joke with him over so serious a matter. When he was finally convinced that I was in earnest, he ventured to inquire how would I perform a miracle. Then I asked him if he had ever heard of original or organized effort, to which he replied, "What do you mean by organized effort?" I informed him that I had reference to the direction of his effort in such a manner that he would enroll from 5 to 10 students with the same amount of effort that he had been putting into the enrollment of one or of none. He said he was willing to be shown. So I gave him instructions to arrange for me to speak before the employees of one of the local department stores. He made the appointment and I delivered the address. In my talk, I outlined a plan through which the employees could not only increase their ability so that they could earn more money in their present position, but also offer them an opportunity to prepare themselves for greater responsibilities and better positions. Following my talk, which of course was designed for that purpose, my friend enrolled 8 of those employees for night courses in the commercial school that he represented. The following night, he booked me for a similar address for employees of a laundry, and following the address, he enrolled 3 more students, 2 of them young women who worked over the washing machines at the hardest sort of labor. 2 days later, he booked me for an address before the employees of one of the local banks. And following the address, he enrolled 4 more students, making a total of 15 students. And the entire time consumed was not more than 6 hours, including the time required for the delivery of the address and the enrollment of the students. My friend's commission of the transaction was a little over $400. These places of employment were within 15 minutes walk of this man's place of business, but he had never thought of looking there for business. Neither had he thought of allying himself with a speaker who could assist him in a group selling. That man now owns a splendid commercial school of his own, and I'm informed that his net income last year was over $10,000. No opportunities come your way. Perhaps they come, but you do not see them. Perhaps you will see them in the future as you are preparing yourself through the aid of this reading course on the law of success so that you can recognize an opportunity when you see it. The fourth lesson of this course is on the subject of imagination, which was a chef factor that entered into the transaction that I have just related. Imagination, plus a definite plan, plus self confidence, plus action were the main factors that entered into this transaction. You know now how to use all of these, and before you shall have finished this lesson, you will understand how to direct these factors through self control. Now let us examine the scope of meaning of the term self control as it is used in connection with this course by describing the general conduct of a person who possesses it. A person with well developed self control does not indulge in hatred, envy, jealousy, fear, revenge, or any similar destructive emotions. A person with well developed self control does not go into ecstasies or become ungovernably enthusiastic over anything or anybody. Greed and selfishness and self approval beyond the point of accurate self analysis and appreciation of one's actual merits indicate lack of self control in one of its most dangerous forms. Self confidence is one of the important essentials of success, but when its faculty is developed beyond the point of reason, it becomes very dangerous. Self sacrifice is a commendable quality, but when it is carried to extremes, it also becomes one of the dangerous forms of lack of self control. You owe it to yourself not to permit your emotions to place your happiness in the keeping of another person. Love is essential for happiness, but the person who loves so deeply that his or her happiness is placed entirely in the hands of another resembles the little lamb who crept into the den of the nice, gentle little wolf and begged to be permitted to lie down and go to sleep, or to canary bird that persists in playing with a car's or cat's whiskers. A person with well developed self control will not permit himself to be influenced by the cynic or the pessimist, nor will he permit another person to do his thinking for him. Self control is the result of thought control. I am in your thoughts. I'm planting seeds. It reminds me of that movie, Dinner with Schmucks. I'm planting seeds in your brain. I have mind control. And gotta have humor. A person with well developed self control will stimulate his imagination and his enthusiasm until they have produced action. But he will then control that action and not permit it to control him. A person with well developed self control will never, under any circumstances, slander another person or seek revenge for any cause whatsoever. A person with self control will not hate those who do not agree with him. Instead, he will endeavor to understand the reason for their disagreement and profit by it. We come now to a form of lack of self control that causes more grief than all other forms of combined. It is the habit of forming opinions before studying the facts. We will not analyze this particular form in detail in this lesson for the reason that it is fully covered in lesson 10, accurate thought. But the subject of self-control could not be covered without at least a passing reference to this common evil to which we are all more or less addicted. No one has any right to form an opinion that is not based either upon that which he believes to be facts or upon a reasonable hypothesis. Yet, if you will observe yourself carefully, you will catch yourself forming opinions on nothing more substantial than your desire for a thing to be or not to be. Another grievous form of lack of self control is the spending habit. Have reference, of course, to the habit of spending beyond one's needs. This habit has become so prevalent since the close of the World War that is alarming. A well known economist has prophesied that three more generations will transform the United States from the richest country in the world to the poorest if the children are not taught the savings habit as a part of their training in both the schools and at home. On every day, we see people buying automobiles on the installment plan instead of buying homes. Within the last 15 years, the automobile fad has become so popular that the literally tens of thousands of people are mortgaging their futures to own cars. A prominent scientist who has a keen sense of humor has prophesied that not only will this habit grow lean bank accounts, but if persisted in, will eventually grow babies whose legs will have become transformed into wheels. This is a speed man, money spending age in which we are living, and the uppermost thought in the mind of most of us is to live faster than our neighbors. Not long ago, the general manager of a concern that employs 600 men and women became alarmed over the large number of his employees who were becoming involved with loan sharks and decided to put an end to this evil. When he completed this investigation, he found that only 9% of his employees had saving accounts, and of the other 91% who had no money ahead, 75% were in debt. In one form or another, some of them began hopelessly involved financially. Of those who were in debt, 210 owned automobiles. We are creatures of imitation. We find it hard to resist the temptation to do that which we see others doing. If our neighbor buys a Buick, we must imitate him. And if we cannot scrape together enough to make the first payment of a Buick, we must at least have a Ford. Meanwhile, we take no heed of the marrow. The old-fashioned rainy day nest egg has become obsolete. We live from day to day. We buy our coal by the pound and our flour in 5 pound sacks, thereby paying a third more for it than it ought to be cost because it is distributed in a small quantities. Of course, this warning does not apply to you, does it? It is intended only for those who are binding themselves in the chains of poverty by spending beyond their earning capacity, and who have not yet heard that there are definite laws that must be observed by all who would attain success. Means as if you spend more than you make, of course you're going to be in poor. That's why you try to save, put money aside. I do that. I just go store shopping or what is it? Window shopping. I look, but I don't buy. The automobile is one of the modern wonders of the world, but it is more often a luxury than it is a necessity. And tens of thousands of people who are now stepping on the gas at a lively pace are going to see some dangerous skidding when their rainy days arrive. It requires considerable self-control to use the streetcars as a means of transportation when people all around us are driving automobiles, but all who exercise this self-control are practically sure to see the day when many who are now driving cars will be either riding the street cars or walking. It was this modern tendency to spend the entire income that prompted Henry Ford to safeguard his employees with certain restrictions when he established his famous $5 a day minimum wage scale. 20 years ago, if a boy wanted a wagon, he fashioned the wheels out of boards and had the pleasure to build it himself. Now, if a boy wants a wagon, he cries for it and gets it. Lack of self control is being developed in the oncoming generations by their parents, which I'm working on breaking that cycle with my kid. And my mom thinks I'm being horrible. I'm like, well, mom, how am I going to teach them if I'm not at least a little bit strict? Their parents who have become victims of the spending habit. 3 generations ago, practically any boy could mend his own shoes with the family cobbling outfit. Today, the boy takes his shoes to the corner shoe shop and pays $1.75 for heels and half soles. And this habit is by no means confined to the rich and well-to-do classes. I repeat, the spending habits is turning America into a nation of paupers. I am safe in assuming that you are struggling to attain success, for if you were not, you would not be reading this course. Let me remind you then that a little savings account will attract many an opportunity to you that would not come your way without it. The size of the account is not so important, as is the fact that you have established a savings habit. For this habit marks you as a person who exercises an important form of self control. The modern tendency of those who work for a salary is to spend it all, which my son is learning this. He's doing pretty good, and but and it's because he has me not charging him for gas to get to and from work. So a man who receives 3,000 a year and manages to get along on it fairly well receives an increase of 1,000 a year. Does he continue to live on 3,000 and place the increased portion of his income in the savings bank? No, not unless he is one of the few who have developed the savings habit. Then what does he do with this additional 1,000? He trades in the automobile and buys a more expensive one. And at the end of the year, he is poorer on a 4,000 income than he was the previous year on a 3,000 income. This is a modern 20th century model American that I'm describing, and you will be lucky if, upon close analysis, You do not find yourself to be one of this class. Somewhere between the miser who hoards every penny he gets his hands on and an old sock, and the man who spends every cent he can earn or borrow, there is a happy medium. And if you enjoy life with reasonable assurance of average freedom and contentment, you must find this halfway point and adapt it as a part of your self-control program. Means when you go to the store, you don't need to buy more than you need or buy more movies or anything. Self-discipline is the most essential factor in the development of personal power because it enables you to control your appetite, your tendency to spend more than you earn, your habit of striking back at those who offend you, and the other destructive habits that cause you to dissipate your energies through non-productive effort that takes on forms too numerous to be cataloged in this lesson. Very early in my public career, I was shocked when I learned how many people there are who devote most of their energies to tearing down that which the buildings construct. By some queer turn of the wheel of fate, one of these destroyers crossed my path by making it his business to try to destroy my reputation. At first, I was inclined to strike back at him, but as I sat at my typewriter late one night, a thought came to me that changed my entire attitude toward this man. Removing the sheet of paper that was in my typewriter, I inserted another one, on which I stated the thought in these words: you have a tremendous advantage over the man who does you an injury. You have it within your power to forgive him while he has no such advantage over you. As I finished writing those lines, I made up my mind that I come to the point at which I had to decide upon a policy that would serve as a guide concerning my attitude toward those who criticize my work or try to destroy my reputation. I reached this decision by reasoning something after this fashion. Two courses of action were open to me. I could waste much of my time and energy in striking back at those who would try to destroy me. Or could I devote this energy to furthering my life work and let the result of that work serve as my sole answer to all who would criticize my efforts or question my motives? I decided upon the latter as being the better policy and adapt it. By their deeds you shall know them. If your deeds are constructive and you are at peace with yourself, in your own heart, you will not find it necessary to stop and explain your motives, for they will explain themselves. The world soon forgets its destroyers. It builds its monuments to and bestows its honors upon none but its builders. Keep this fact in mind, and you will more easily reconcile yourself to the policy of refusing to waste your energies by striking back at those who offend you. Other person who amounts to anything in this world comes to the point, sooner or later, at which he is forced to settle this question, a policy toward his enemies. And if you want proof that it pays to exercise sufficient self-control to refrain from dissipating your vital energies by striking back, then study the records of all who have risen to high station in life and observe how carefully they curbed this destructive habit. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. It is a well-known fact that no man ever reached a high station in life without a position of a violent nature from jealous or envious enemies. The late President Warren G. Harding and ex-President Wilson had John H. Patterson of the National Cash Register Company, and scores of others whom I could mention were victims of this cruel tendency of a certain type of depraved man to destroy reputation. But these men wasted no time explaining or striking back at their enemies. They exercised self-control. I do not know, but that these attacks of men who are in public life cruel and unjust and untruthful, as they often are, serve a good purpose. In my own case, I know that I made a discovery that was a great value to me as a result of a series of bitter attacks that a contemporary journalists launched against me. I paid no attention to these attacks for or 5 years until finally they became so bold that I decided to override my policy and strike back at my agonists. I sat down at my typewriter and began to write. In all of my experience as a writer, I do not believe I ever assembled such a collection of biting adjectives as those I used on this occasion. The more I wrote, the angrier I became, until I had exhausted all that I could think of on the subject. As the last line was finished, a strange feeling came over me. It was not a feeling of bitterness toward the man who had tried to injure me. It was a feeling of compassion, of sympathy, or forgiveness. I had unconsciously psychologized myself by releasing over the keys of my typewriter the repressed emotions of hate and resentment that I had been unintentionally gathering in my subconscious mind over a long period of years. Now, if I find myself becoming very angry, I sit down at my typewriter and I write it out of my system. Then throw away the manuscript or file it away as an exhibit for my scrapbook, to which I can refer back in the years to come after the evolutionary process has carried me still higher in the realm of understanding. Repressed emotions, especially the emotions of hatred, resemble a bomb that has been constructed of high explosions, and unless they are handled with a such understanding of their nature as an expert would handle a bomb, they are as dangerous. A bomb may be rendered harmless by explosion in an open field or by disintegration in a bath of the proper sort. Also, a feeling of anger or hatred may be rendered harmless by giving expression to it in a manner that harmonizes with the principle of psych- psychoanalysis. Before you can achieve success in the higher and broader sense, you must gain such thought control over yourself that you will be a person of poise. That means don't write something hurtful to anybody in your inbox. No matter what you're feeling, write it on a freaking piece of paper and throw the shit away or keep it for later that you might have aggression. Because how would you like somebody to respond back to you if I read everything that you said in my inbox and it was such hurtful and it brought you down? Do you think you should answer back to that person? I'm just bringing this out because it'd make you so you wouldn't want to talk to them. But that's just my suggestion. You are the product of at least a million years of evolution change for countless generations preceding you. Nature has been tempering and refining the materials that have gone into your makeup. Step by step, she has removed from the generations that have preceded you the animal instinct, the baser passions, until she has produced in you the finest specimen of animal that lives. She has endowed you through this slow evolutionary process with reason and poise and balance sufficient to enable you to control and do with yourself whatever you will. No other animal has ever been endowed with such self control as you possess. You have been endowed with the power to use the most highly organized form of energy known to man, that of thought. It is not improbable that thought is the closest connection link there is between the material physical things of the world and the world of divi- divinity. Ugh. You have not only the power to think, but what is a thousand times more important still, you have the power to control your thoughts and direct them to do your bidding. We are coming now to the really important part of this lesson. Read slowly and meditatively. I approach this part of this lesson with due consideration, for it brings us face to face with a subject that few men are qualified to discuss with reasonable intelligence. I repeat, you have the power to control your thoughts and make them do your bidding. I repeat, you have the power to control your thoughts and make them do your bidding. Your brain may be linked to a dynamo in this respect that it generates or sets into motion the mysterious energy called thought. The stimuli that start your brain into action are of sorts. One is autosuggestion, and the other is suggestion. You can select the material out of which your thinking is produced, and that is autosuggestion or self suggestion. You can permit others to select the material out of which your thinking is produced, and that is suggestion. It is a humiliating fact that most thought is produced by the outside suggestions of others. And it is more humiliating still to have admit that the majority of us accept this suggestion without either examining it or questioning its soundness. We read the daily papers as though every word we base on is fact. We are swayed by the gossip and idle chatter of others as though every word were true. A man's character is but the crystallized reflection of the thought that dominate his mind and the deeds he performs. That's a good saying right there. A man's character is but the crystallized reflection of the thoughts that dominate his mind and the deeds he performs. So remember that. That's a good post. That would be a good one for a post. Thought is the only thing over which you have absolute control. Yet, unless you are the proverbial exception, which is about one out of every 10,000, you permit other people to enter the sacred mansion of your mind in their deposit through suggestion. Their troubles and woes, adversities, and falsehoods, just as though you did not have the power to close the door and keep them out. You have within your control the power to select the material that constitutes the dominating thoughts of your mind. And just as surely as you are reading these lines, those thoughts that dominating your mind will bring you success or failure according to their nature. The fact that thought is the only thing over which you have absolute control is within itself a most profound significance because it strongly suggests that thought is your nearest approach to divinity on this earthly plane. This fact also carries another highly impressive suggestion, namely, that thought is your most important tool, the one with which you may shape your worldly destiny according to your own liking. Surely divine providence did not make thought the sole power over which you have absolute control without associating with that power potentialities that, if understood and developed, would stagger the imagination. Self control is solely a matter of thought control. Please read the foregoing sentence aloud, read it thoughtfully, and meditate over it before reading further because it is without doubt the most important single sentence of this entire course. You are studying this course presumably because you are earnestly seeking truth and understanding sufficient to enable you to attain some high station in life. You are searching for the magic key that will unlock the door to the source of power, and yet you have the key in your hands, and you make use of it the moment you learn to control your thoughts. Place in your mind, through the principle of autosuggestion, positive, constructive thoughts that harmonize with your definite purpose in life, and that mind will transform those thoughts into physical reality and hand them back to you as a finished product. This is thought control. When you deliberately choose the thought that dominate your mind and firmly refuse admittance to outstand suggestion, you are exercising self-control in its highest and most efficient form. Man is the only living animal that can do this. How many millions of years nature has required in which to produce this animal, no one knows. But every intelligent student of psychology knows that the dominating thoughts determine the actions and the nature of the animal. The process through which one may think accurately is a subject that has been reserved for lesson 10 of this course. The point we wish to clearly establish in this lesson is the thought, whether accurate or inaccurate, is the most highly organized functioning power of your mind, and that you are but the sum total of your dominating or most prominent thoughts. It would be a master salesman, whether of goods and wares or a personal service. You must exercise sufficient self control to shut out all adverse arguments and suggestion. Most salesmen have so little self control that they hear the prospective purchaser say no, even before he says it. Not a few salesmen hear this fatal word, no, even before they come into the presence of their prospector purchaser. They have so little self-control that they actually suggest to themselves that their prospect purchaser will say no when asked to purchase their wares. How different is the man of self-control? He not only suggests to himself that his prospective purchaser will say yes, but if the desired yes is not forthcoming, he stays on the job until he breaks down the opposition and forces a yes. If his prospective purchaser says no, he does not hear it. If it, if his prospective purchaser says no, a second and a third and a fourth time, he does not hear it. He is a man of self-control, and he permits no suggestion to reach his mind except those that he desires to influence him. The master salesman, whether he be engaged in selling merchandise or personal service or summons on public address, understand how to control his own thoughts instead of being a person who accepts with meek submission the suggestions of others. He is a person who persuades others to accept his suggestion by controlling himself by placing only positioned thoughts in his mind. He thereby becomes a dominating personality, a master salesman. But also lead with heart. I mean, some of these things, but you still got to lead with heart. If somebody says no, you say, okay, thank you. But I'm here if you need me. This too is self control. A master salesman is one who takes the offensive and never the defense side of an argument. If argument arises, please read the foregoing sentences again. If you are a master salesman, you know that it is necessary for you to keep your prospective purchaser on the defense. And you also know that it will be fatal to your sale if you permit him to place you on the defense and keep you there. You may, and of course you will at times, be placed in a position in which you will have to assume the defense side of the conversation for a time. But it is your business to exercise such perfect poise and self-control that you will change places with your prospective purchase without his noticing that you have done so by placing him back on the defense. This requires most consummate skill and self-control. Most salesmen sweep this vital point aside by becoming angry and trying to scare the prospect purchaser into submission. But the master salesman remains calm and serene and usually comes out the winner. The word salesman has reference to all people who try to persuade or convince others by logical argument or apply to self-interest. We are all salesmen, or at least we should be, no matter what form of service we are rendering or what sort of goods we are offering. The ability to negotiate with other people without friction and argument is the outstanding quality of all successful people. Observe those nearest you and notice how few there are who understand this art of tactful negotiation. Observe also how successful are the few who understand this art, despite the fact that they may have less education than those with whom they negotiate. The art of successful negotiate grows out of patient and painstaking self-control. Notice how easily the successful salesman exercises self-control when he is handling a customer who is impatient. In his heart, such a salesman may be boiling over, but you will see no evidence of it in his face or manner or words. He has acquired the art of tactful negotiation. A single frown of disapproval or a single word denoting impatient will often spoil a sale, and no one knows this better than the successful salesman. He makes it his business to control his feelings, and as a reward he sets his own salary mark and chooses his own position. To watch a person who has acquired the art of successful negotiation is a liberal education within himself. Watch the public speaker who has acquired this art. Notice the firmness of his step as he mounts the platform. Observe the firmness of his voice as he begins to speak. Study the expression on his face as he sweeps his audience with the mastery of his argument. He has learned how to negotiate without friction. Watch the physician who has acquired this art as he walks into the sick room and greets his patient with a smile. His bearing, the tone of his voice, the look of assurance on his face, all mark him as one who has acquired the art of successful negotiation. And the patient begins to feel better the moment he enters the sick room. Watch the foreman of the works who has acquired this art, and observe how his very presence spurs his men to greater effort and inspires them with confidence and enthusiasm. Watch a lawyer who has acquired this art, and observe how he commands the respect and attention of the court, the jury, and his fellow practitioners. There is something about the tone of his voice, the posture of his body, and the expression on his face that causes his opponent to suffer by comparison. He not only knows his case, but he convinces the court and the jury that he knows. As his reward, he wins his case and he claims big returning fees. And all of this predictated upon self-control. And self-control is a result of thought control. Deliberately place in your mind the sort of thoughts that you desire there, and keep out of your mind those thoughts that others place there through suggestion, and you will become a person of self-control. This privilege of stimulating your mind with suggestion and thoughts of your own choosing is your prerogative power that divine providence gave you. And if you will exercise this holy right, there is nothing within the bounds of reason that you cannot attain. Losing your temper, and with it your case or your argument or your sale marks you as the one who has not yet familiarized himself with the fundamentals upon which self-control is based. And the chef one of these fundamentals is the privilege of choosing the thoughts that dominate the mind. A student in one of my classes once asked how one went about controlling one's thoughts when in a state of intense anger, and I replied, in exactly the same way that you would change your manner and the tone of your voice if you were in a heated argument with a member of your family and heard the doorbell ring, warning you the company was about to visit you. You would control yourself because you would desire to do so. If you have ever been in a similar, I actually have, before I go on, I actually have had an incident. I used to control whenever I would get into an argument with someone that I was living with, which and because I didn't want people to look at him in any light. And then when it came to the end of our relationship, I said, hell with it. I didn't care. I lost all self-control. I literally lost all self-control. So I can relate in that aspect. We can control ourselves. We choose to. If you have ever been in a similar predicament in which you found it necessary to cover up your real feelings and change the expression on your face quickly, you know how easily it can be done. And you also know that it can be done because one wants to do it. Back of all achievement, back of all self-control, back of all thought control is the magic something called desire. It is no misstatement of fact that to say you are limited only by the depth of your desires. When your desires are strong enough, you will appear to possess superhuman powers to achieve. No one has ever explained that strange phenomenon of the mind, and perhaps no one ever will explain it. But if you doubt that it exists, you have but to experiment and be convinced. If you were in a building that was on fire and all the doors and windows were locked, the chances are that you would develop sufficient strength within which to break down the average door because of your intense desire to free yourself, which is true. If you desire to acquire the art of successful negotiation, as you undoubtedly will, when you understand its significance in relation to your achievement of your definite purpose, you will do so, providing your desire is intense enough. Napoleon desired to become empire, emperor of France and did rule. Lincoln desired to free the slaves, and he accomplished it. The French desired that they shall not pass at the beginning of the World War, and they didn't pass. Edison desired to produce light with electricity, and he produced it. Although he was many years in doing so, Roosevelt desired to unite the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans through the Panama Canal, and he did it. Demosthenes desired, I think I'm saying that, Demosthenes, desired to become a public speaker, and despite the handicap of serious impediment of speech, he transformed his desire into reality. Helen Keller desired to speak, and despite the fact that she was deaf, dumb, and blind, she now speaks. John H. Patterson desired to dominate in the production of cash registers, and he did it. Marshall Field desired to the leading merchant of his time, and he did it. Shakespeare desired to become a great playwright, and despite the fact that he was only a poor and inter- int- interact actor, he made his desire come true. Billy Sunday desired to quit playing baseball and become a master preacher, and he did it. James J. Hill desired to become an empire builder, and despite the fact that he was only a poor telegraph operator, he transformed that desire into reality. Don't say it can't be done, or that you are different from these and thousands of others who have achieved noteworthy success in every worthy calling. If you are different, it is only in the respect they desired the object of their achievement with more depth and intensity than you desire yours. In closing this lesson, permit me to recommend that you plant your mind in the seed of a desire that is constructed by making the following your creed and the foundation of your code of ethics. I wish to be of service to my fellow man as I journey through life. I do this. I have adapted this creed as a guide to be followed in dealing with my fellow beings. To train myself so that never under any circumstances will I find fault with any person, no matter how much I may disagree with him or her, or how inferior his work may be, as long as I know he is sincerely trying to do his best. To respect my country, my profession, and myself, to be honest and fair with my fellow men, as I respect them to be honest and fair with me. To be a loyal citizen of my country, to speak of it with praise, and act always a worthy custodian of its good name. To be a person whose name carries weight wherever it goes. To base my expectations of reward on a solid foundation of service rendered. To be willing to pay the price of success and honest effort. To look upon my work as an opportunity to be seized with joy and made the most of, and not as a painful drudgery to be reluctant endured. To remember that success lies within myself, in my own brain, to expect difficulties and to force my way through them, to avoid procrastination in all its forms, and never under any circumstances put off until tomorrow any duty that should be performed today. Finally, to take a good grip on the joys of life, so I may be courteous to men, faithful to friends, and true to God, a fragrance in the path I tread. You you not only have the power to think, but the power to control your thoughts and direct them. Definition and terms. Poise, freedom from nervousness and fear. Adaptation to environment. Ability to cooperate with others without causing friction or antagonism. Willpower, determination to transform one's desires into reality, regardless of the time or effort required. Patience, mastery of worry and anxiety and nervousness. Coordination of effort, order, orderliness of procedure through the aid of perfect plans. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate. Hey, Anthony. Oh, I appreciate you, Anthony Nemnaz. He's a great coach. Do follow that individual as well. He's an awesome man. I do appreciate you. So if you have any questions, I hope you got some really good value and nuggets out of that lesson. I am so grateful and thankful. You all have an amazing day. God bless. Have a good evening, good night, good afternoon. And please reach out if you need my help. Thank you.